Daniel Carter, a 28-year-old MIT graduate who developed aviation software and advised Fortune 500 companies, faced something his white colleagues never did: constantly being asked to prove who he was. But this time was different. This time, the proof was on record, and Laura's whispered words would expose the quiet face of corporate racism to the entire world, triggering an unprecedented wave of accountability across the aviation industry. Before the story starts, drop a comment. Which city are you watching from? And if you stand for justice and equality, share this story and subscribe to our channel. Together, we can make our voices stronger. Denver International Airport's concourse hummed with the organized chaos of Thursday afternoon travelers. Daniel Carter walked through the terminal with the confident stride of someone who knew these halls well. He'd made this Boston to Denver to Seattle route at least twice a month for the past 3 years, consulting with aerospace companies on AI-driven flight management systems. At 28, Daniel had already accomplished more than most people did in a lifetime: MIT degree in computer science, 2 patents in aviation safety technology, and a consulting firm that Fortune 500 companies competed to hire. His software had improved fuel efficiency for major airlines by 18% and potentially saved countless lives through predictive maintenance algorithms. But none of that mattered when people looked at his dark skin before they saw his credentials. He'd learned to anticipate it: the double takes in first-class cabins, the extra scrutiny at security checkpoints, the subtle surprise when he spoke about complex technical concepts. His white colleagues sailed through these same spaces without a second glance, while Daniel had developed a carefully practiced routine of preemptive ID showing and credential displaying to smooth interactions before they became confrontations. Today, he headed toward the Sky West Executive Lounge, a space he'd accessed hundreds of times with his platinum membership. His phone was in his jacket pocket, set to voice memo mode, a habit he'd developed after too many uncomfortable encounters where his word alone hadn't been enough. The phone captured everything: ambient conversations, interactions with staff, evidence of what really happened versus what people claimed happened later. The lounge entrance gleamed with polished chrome and frosted glass. Through the windows, Daniel could see business travelers working on laptops, families enjoying complimentary meals, the quiet luxury that made long layovers bearable. He approached the desk where Laura Mitchell, the lounge manager he'd seen dozens of times before, stood reviewing paperwork. "Good afternoon," Daniel said pleasantly, reaching for his wallet. "I'm here for the lounge." Laura looked up, and Daniel saw the now familiar flicker in her expression: the momentary assessment, the quick calculation based on his appearance. Despite his tailored blazer and leather briefcase, despite the obvious markers of professional success, her eyes registered suspicion first. "Do you have a membership?" Laura asked, her tone just professional enough to pass as neutral, but carrying an edge that Daniel recognized immediately. "Yes, I'm a platinum member," Daniel replied, extending his card with the distinctive black and gold design that marked the highest tier of access. "Daniel Carter, I've been here many times before." Laura took the card, but instead of scanning it immediately as she did for other guests, she held it up to the light, examining it closely as if checking for counterfeits. Daniel felt the familiar tightness in his chest, anger mixed with exhaustion at having to prove himself yet again. "I'll need to verify this," Laura said, turning to her computer. Her fingers moved slowly across the keyboard, taking far longer than necessary for a simple membership check. Behind Daniel, 2 white businessmen approached the desk. Laura glanced up at them, smiled warmly, and said, "I'll be right with you, gentlemen. Just finishing up here." The implication was clear: Daniel was a problem to be finished up, while the men behind him were valued guests to be welcomed. Daniel's jaw tightened, but he maintained his composure. His phone was still recording in his pocket, capturing every word, every interaction. "Mr. Carter," Laura said finally, her tone suggesting she'd found something problematic, "your membership shows as active, but I'm going to need to see additional identification. We've had issues with shared memberships and unauthorized access." "Issues with shared memberships?" Daniel repeated carefully. I've never shared my membership. This is my personal account that I've held for 3 years. Here's my driver's license and my corporate ID from Tech Arrow Consulting. He placed both IDs on the counter. Laura barely glanced at them before sliding them back. Corporate ID isn't sufficient for our verification purposes, she said. And we've been instructed to be extra vigilant about access control. I'm sure you understand. Security is very important these days. The words "these days" carried weight that had nothing to do with legitimate security concerns. Daniel understood perfectly what she meant, even if she'd never say it explicitly. People who looked like him were automatically classified as security risks, their presence in exclusive spaces requiring extra justification. I understand security is important, Daniel said, his voice remaining level. But I'm a regular member who's accessed this lounge dozens of times. My credentials are valid. What specific security concern are you addressing by denying me access? Laura's expression hardened. I'm not denying you access, sir. I'm following proper verification procedures. If you'd like to file a complaint about our security protocols, there's a customer service number you can call. She finally scanned his membership card, the computer immediately confirming what Daniel had said all along. Active Platinum membership, frequent user, 0 issues or complaints on record. Laura looked almost disappointed that the system hadn't flagged anything problematic. You're cleared to enter, she said grudgingly, handing back his card. But in the future, please have your identification ready to present immediately. It saves time for everyone. Daniel took his card, noting that the 2 businessmen behind him had been waved through with just a smile and a quick scan. No additional ID required. No lectures about having documentation ready. The double standard was so blatant, it would have been laughable if it weren't so exhausting. Thank you, Daniel said politely, because responding with the anger he felt would only confirm whatever stereotypes Laura was operating under. He turned to walk into the lounge, his phone still recording in his pocket, capturing every footstep, every ambient sound. And then he heard it. Laura's voice, lowered but not quite low enough, speaking to her colleague behind the desk. Finally, I swear, they always try to sneak in here like they own the place. The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. Not just the content, but the casual nature of it, the assumption that he'd moved out of earshot, the comfortable prejudice shared between colleagues who thought no one was listening. His phone had captured it all, the crystal-clear audio picking up what Laura assumed was a private comment. Daniel kept walking into the lounge, his face carefully neutral despite the rage and hurt churning inside him. He found a quiet corner, pulled out his laptop, and opened the voice memo file. He listened to the entire interaction, hearing Laura's subtle hostility, the unnecessary verification demands, and then that final comment. The smoking gun that proved what he'd suspected all along. They always try to sneak in here like they own the place. For hours later, Daniel was at his gate waiting to board his flight to Seattle when he made his decision. He'd spent years swallowing similar indignities, telling himself it wasn't worth the fight, that proving his competence through his work was enough. But that comment, that casual, vicious dismissal of his right to exist in spaces he'd rightfully earned access to, crystallized something inside him. He opened his social media accounts and uploaded the audio recording along with a simple caption. This is what everyday racism sounds like in 2024. I'm a platinum member who's accessed this lounge hundreds of times. I'm an MIT graduate who designs the software that keeps planes safe. But to SkyWest Executive Lounge Manager Laura Mitchell, I'm just another one of them trying to sneak into spaces where I don't belong. This has to stop. He hit post and boarded his flight, having no idea that he'd just lit a fuse on a bomb that would detonate across the aviation industry. By the time his plane landed in Seattle 3 hours later, Daniel's post had 47,000 shares. By morning, it had reached 2.3 million views. Major news outlets picked up the story. Civil rights organizations issued statements. And SkyWest Airlines found itself at the center of a viral controversy that threatened everything from customer loyalty to federal contracts. The airline's response was swift and comprehensive. Within 24 hours, CEO Jennifer Morrison released a video statement. "We have zero tolerance for discrimination of any kind. The behavior captured in this recording violates every value our company stands for. Laura Mitchell has been terminated effective immediately, and we are conducting a full audit of our customer service protocols." But Daniel's post had opened a floodgate. Hundreds of other travelers, particularly people of color, began sharing their own stories of being profiled, questioned, and denied access to airline lounges and first-class services despite having valid credentials. The pattern was undeniable, a systemic problem far bigger than one manager's prejudice. SkyWest announced sweeping reforms: mandatory bias training for all customer-facing employees, anonymous reporting systems for discrimination complaints, diverse hiring panels, and most significantly, the implementation of blind verification protocols, where membership status was confirmed through systems rather than subject to individual employee discretion. Laura Mitchell's termination made headlines, but for Daniel, the victory felt hollow. He hadn't wanted to destroy someone's career. He'd wanted to expose a system that made people like him constantly prove their right to belong. Laura was a symptom, not the disease. 2 weeks after the incident, Daniel received an unexpected call. Jennifer Morrison, the CEO herself, wanted to meet personally. They sat in a coffee shop in Seattle, far from corporate offices and media attention. "I want to hire you," Jennifer said directly. "Not as a consultant on aviation software. As our Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer. We need someone who understands both the technology side and the human cost of systemic discrimination. We need someone who won't let us get comfortable with surface changes while deeper problems persist." Daniel studied her carefully. "You're offering me a job because I went viral calling out your company's racism? I'm offering you a job because you had the courage to document and expose a problem that we'd been ignoring for years. Because you're clearly brilliant at what you do, and we need that brilliance focused on making real change. And because I'm tired of running a company where talented people like you have to record their interactions just to be believed when discrimination happens." The offer was genuine, and the salary was substantial. But more importantly, it came with real authority, direct reporting to the CEO, power to implement policy changes, and a mandate to transform the company's culture from the inside. Daniel took the job. Over the next year, he led the most comprehensive anti-discrimination overhaul in airline history. Every policy, every training program, every customer interaction protocol was examined through the lens of equity. Employee diversity increased. Discrimination complaints dropped by 73%. And most importantly, travelers of color began reporting that they finally felt welcome in spaces that had long made them feel like intruders. Laura Mitchell, meanwhile, became an unexpected ally. After losing her job and facing public backlash, she enrolled in a deep-dive diversity training program, confronted her own biases, and began volunteering with organizations fighting workplace discrimination. She reached out to Daniel months later with a simple message: "I'm sorry. I was wrong, and I'm trying to do better." Daniel met with her, not because he owed her forgiveness, but because he believed in the possibility of change. Laura's transformation wasn't complete. Unlearning decades of prejudice took time, but her willingness to try meant something. The recording that went viral became a training tool used across the airline industry, a perfect example of how casual racism operates in professional spaces. Daniel's voice, calm and professional despite the discrimination he faced, and Laura's whispered comment, casual and cruel, illustrated the daily reality for millions of people navigating spaces where they're constantly questioned and doubted. But the real lesson wasn't about one bad manager or one viral moment. It was about the courage required to document injustice, the importance of believing people when they report discrimination, and the power of institutional change when companies finally decide to prioritize equity over comfort. Daniel still travels constantly for work, still accesses executive lounges, still encounters occasional skepticism. But now, when he walks into a SkyWest facility, staff members greet him by name, not because he's the viral video guy, but because the company has finally implemented systems that value all members equally regardless of how they look. And his phone is still in his pocket, still set to record, because the work of fighting discrimination is never truly finished. But now, instead of being a solitary act of self-protection, it's part of a larger movement toward accountability, transparency, and the radical idea that people shouldn't have to prove their humanity just to access spaces they've rightfully earned.